Lynn Ortega, mic check.
Lynn, we can hear you. Thank you. Jean and Chris, would you like to do a mic check?
This is Gene. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. We can hear you.
Great.
Hi, this is Chris Chillinan. Thank you.
Chris, can you try that one more time?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Rocio.
Good afternoon.
Loud and clear. We can hear
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Anyone else who would like to do a mic check? Good afternoon.
Hi, this is Dave Barry. Can you hear me?
Yes, David, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hello, this is David Worthington. Can you hear me okay?
David, we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Sarah Hendricks.
Sarah, we can hear you as well.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure. We have a David Barry. There are two of you in the room. Can you please identify yourself?
Yeah, sorry, that's me twice. I'm on my phone app and desktop just because I have problems with my earbuds connecting.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Yeah, they're both me.
Great, thank you. Hello, John.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody.
Recording
I have
in
about
progress.
2 o'clock now, and let's see if we should be able to get this rolling. Are we good to go, staff?
Yes, it's after 2 o'clock. We have both members present, so whenever you'd like to begin, we're ready to go.
All right, good afternoon. Well, first, welcome everyone, and we'd like to call the FGOC meeting to order at this time. I am Supervisor Otto Lee. I'm on to be chairing the Finance Government Operations Committee, along with my Vice Chair, Supervisor Cindy Chavez, here today. With both supervisors present, we have a quorum, and this takes us to the first item of our agenda. This item is for public comment, which is reserved for persons desiring to address the committee on any matter not on this agenda. Members of the public who wish to address the committee on any item not listed on the agenda should request to speak at this time. Individuals will be called to speak in turn, and the law does not permit committee action or extended discussion on any items that's not on the agenda except under special circumstances. If committee action is requested, the committee may place the matter on the future agenda, and statements that require response may be referred to staff for reply in writing. Clerk, would you please let us know how many speakers we have for public comment right now?
We currently have no request to speak.
All right, then we can move on to the next item, which is approving the consent calendar and changes to the committee's agenda. Items removed from the consent calendar will be considered at the end of the regular agenda for discussion. The committee may also add items on the regular agenda to the consent calendar. The notice to the public is that there's no separate discussions of consent calendar items, and the recommended actions are voted on in one motion. If an item is approved on the consent vote, the specific action recommended by staff will be adopted. Members of the public who wish to address the committee on consent calendar items should comment under this item, and each speaker is limited to 2 minutes each. But before we open to the public, let me ask Vice Chair Chavez, do you have anything you would like to add or change to the consent calendar?
Thank you, Supervisor Lee. I'm going to go to just a few that I would like to. First, I'd like to add items 5, 8, 9, and 11 to the consent calendar. Regarding the legislative priorities item on number 9, I do have a request. And I understand that Danielle is planning to work with Martha and Imre to develop additional priorities related to broadband that will be brought back to us in January or February. And if staff could review the recent referral approved by the board that was submitted by myself and Supervisor Ellenberg to make sure that it's aligned with that work and that the priorities include affordable broadband access to the public in addition to the library and first responder broadband items. For item 10, the report from Facilities and Fleet regarding potential resolution relating to the electric vehicle charging station fees and providing direction. I'd like to increase the amount of time allowed for regular charging use to 4 hours while still retaining the $5 overstay fee for any time after the initial 4 hours in order to continue to incentivize people to move their cars after 4 hours. I'd like to get a report back in 6 months to see what the impact was to the usage of the stations. Item 20 is related to the EIR for City Hall. And if I could, I'd like to pull that off consent for a couple of questions. And pardon me, let me just to pull it off for a couple of questions. Thank you. And then there was one more I thought I could put on consent. Oh, on item 11, this is This was the pay, I believe this is the pay equity item. And pardon me, I'm going through a number of pieces of paper. I'm sorry, let me come back to item 11. On item 17B, the minutes from September, there are a set of items we directed staff when we heard the behavioral health management audit. And I wanted to confirm that each of these requests is addressed when we hear the 6-month report on the audit. And I would also like to ask that to request these items be addressed in the study session that Dr. Smith is putting together. The direction from our committee dealt with crucial issues like residential bed capacity and working with TSS on the available bed system. Item 26 is the work plan for the Equal Opportunity Commission. And Dr. Smith, I wanted to ask that the commission in the past has received an annual report on the county's workforce to help the commission evaluate our diversity among different classifications and levels of the organization. And I'd like to request that this report again be provided to the commission moving forward, unless there's some problem with doing that. Dr. Smith, if he's available, I'd like to know if that's appropriate.
Supervisor Chavez, he's not available as he has a conflict at 2 o'clock, but we'll try to jump on as soon as he's done.
Oh, no problem. Then what I'll do is I'll leave that as direction as part of the action. And just let me go to item 11 for a moment. This may free staff up if I can just make these comments. And item 11, this is an agenda item per my request from the May 4th board meeting. Item 11 is a report relating to the development and implementation of our pay equity strategy. What I'd like to request is a progress report to the full board at one of our 2 meetings in March 2020, as indicated in the legislative file. And that's all of my comments for consent.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Chavez. I just wanted to have a quick clarification with you. You've requested to put items 5, 8, 10, 5, 8, 9, and 11, right, on consent. Now, did you add 10 as well? Because you mentioned something about item number 10 when you were speaking about.
Oh, yes. Yes, if item with the changes that I just requested, I'd like to put item 10 on as well. And I would like to pull item 20.
Right, and you are pulling 20. Okay, so we now have 5, 8, 9, 10, and 11 on consent and pulling 20 from consent. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Good. All right, good. All right, and I have no further comments. I'll go and open up the public hearing. Anybody would like to speak on that? How many speakers do we have, Clerk?
We currently have no request to speak.
Oh, okay. So, all right.
Pardon me. We do have a late arrival. Would you like me to take that comment now?
Yes, 2 minutes, please.
Sure. The next speaker is Lohana. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak, and the timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, I wasn't sure if I could speak on item 7 right now, or do I have to wait until you guys call for that?
Yes, 7 is not on the consent right now, so if you could wait for a moment, but you should get there shortly. Thank you.
And that concludes our request to speak.
Okay, very good. All right, so if that's the case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and go ahead and take the vote.
Sure, Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 4, which is receiving the monthly report from the Office of County Executive and Facilities and Fleet Departments relating to the status of the Fairgrounds master planning process. And here to present this item, I believe, is our awesome staff from the Assets, Glenn Williams, right? Glenn, are you there?
I am here.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chairman Lee. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chavez. I'm As you well know, we've been in discussions with two entities that presented proposals to utilize some portion of the fairgrounds, both the San Jose Earthquakes and a newly created organization called the American Cricket Enterprises. I am happy to report that we have actually made significant progress with the American Cricket Enterprises. We've been negotiating with them weekly for several months now. And as a result, we have an exclusive negotiating agreement, which has been approved by American Cricket, as well as by the County Executive's Office and County Council. We plan to bring that agreement to the full board on January 11th for its approval. If the board chooses to approve it, it does not bind the board to any specific action in the future. What it does is allow a 12-month period during which due diligence can be done on the various aspects, and financial terms and conditions can be further explored. One of the major outstanding issues, of course, is to fully understand the financial implications of that in terms of both the cost of providing what American Cricket wants to do, which is to create a international quality stadium that could be for as many as 8,000 attendees on a regular basis and up to 15,000 on an expanded basis for special events. The concept that they have produced requires additional refinement. We're contracting to produce a garage study that will give us some idea of what the costs would be to implement the parking changes that would be necessary, since we are giving up 14 acres in that case that are currently used for both parking and for our COVID testing operations. This is a complex and involved process, obviously, to develop a major stadium. So it does require a lot of individual items to be done, and for a full understanding for the board to be able to do any future action. We're looking forward to that. And of course, the 12 months is, we believe, is enough time to accomplish all of those, and hopefully a lot earlier than that. The majority of the due diligence items would be done within the first 4 to 6 months. And that, I have no further updates on the American Cricket, but of course I'm happy to take any questions. As far as the second proposal with the San Jose Earthquakes, that is currently still under negotiation, and I have no direct update for FGOC for that. I do have one other comment to add in addition, which is, of course, normal operations at the fairgrounds are part of master planning as well. And normally at this meeting, administration would bring to FGOC the annual report from FMC as to their business plan for next year and the annual audit, the requirement that the board has. Due to the fact that the audit has not been completed yet, and so there is no audit to present to FGOC, and the business plan for 2022 was approved by FMC's board in November, but subsequent to that, there have been some significant changes that have limited what FMC can do in terms of programming during the next year. And so our hope is to bring the report to you in January with both the completed audit and with the amendments that may be necessary to their business plan, given the fact that COVID-19 is still not predictable, and the various facilities will continue to be used until such time as the county determines that it's no longer necessary for testing and for vaccinations. With that, I'll open up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. William. Supervisor Chavez, do you have any questions on this item?
Yes, I wanted to give Abe Andrade, I see his hand up, a chance to speak. And then I wanted to, I have a number of issues I want to raise.
Thank you, Vice Chairperson Chavez. I wanted just to bring to the board's, to the committee's attention that we this month we were proposing to enter into a contract with Circus du Soleil that would have set their tents on the 14-acre site across the street from the fairgrounds proper. And as a result of the ongoing testing, COVID testing on the 14 acres, county personnel and staff has been reluctant to sign off on allowing us to proceed with that. As a result, we looked for alternative sites on the fairgrounds property, and without making another initial capital investment, they didn't find anything that would, any space on the fairgrounds itself that would serve. So staff and I got busy looking, and we are going to come back and propose an alternate site for Cirque du Soleil to continue to have their presence here in 2022. We're going to look at Lot C, which is the area outside of the off-track bedding facility, and seeing if, in working with personnel from Cirque du Soleil, to see if that would suffice to still have them come here. We believe that it is pertinent that we continue to work with Cirque du Soleil to find a site on the fairgrounds, because not only are we looking to enter into a one-year agreement for 2022, but we are looking for a long-term commitment to be the new home of Cirque du Soleil in the Bay Area for the next 10 years, something that we would bring back to the board, to the FGOC and the Board of Supervisors. But we think, again, it's crucial for us in moving forward. And as Glenn Williams mentioned, we have not been able to bring forward our budget and business plan and capital improvement programming as a result of our auditors not completing the audit in a timely manner. Although we presented our budget, business plan, and capital improvement program to the FMC board, unfortunately, again, our auditors have delayed in finalizing the audit, although our staff has completed all the requirements for the audit to be completed. That being said, I again, as a result of continued COVID operations on the fairgrounds property, we are re-looking at our budget in 2022, taking a look at the various activities that may be delayed in bringing forward various events in the 2022 calendar as a result of the ongoing COVID activities. Unfortunately, we know that it's a priority, and so we'll continue to manage and operate accordingly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, stop. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, yeah. Supervisor Chavez, you have a question? Go ahead.
Oh, a number of them. So Supervisor Lee, I'm going to be asking that our committee make a recommendation to staff that we get feedback on in January at our January FGOC meeting. Mm-hmm. One concern that I have a number of concerns that I'm going to raise, but one of them is that the fairgrounds are not receiving any lease payments for the work for the utilization of the site. And the problem with that is that as we're asking the fairgrounds to move forward with a number of bodies of work, including positioning itself to be, for cricket and for soccer, and hopefully for other opportunities that will be coming down shortly, to not fully fund the utilization of the fairgrounds negatively impacts the long-term health and vitality of the fairgrounds. What I'm asking staff to be prepared to respond to at the meeting in January is to look at the fairgrounds in Alameda, San Mateo, and perhaps either Solano or something in the North Bay to look at how any of those fairgrounds that are providing space and service are being, how that billing's working. I just think I had asked that we do lease payments. I asked this, I think probably almost a year ago. And right now, the way we're handling this is only to pay back for expenses incurred. So that's one issue that I would like to have come back in January. And I'll just see if there are any questions from staff.
If I may, Vice Chairperson, just to mention that, thank you for that, in that just looking at the revenue that would be generated from Cirque du Soleil alone, we would be losing, if we're not able to host them in 2022, we would be losing over $700,000 in revenues just for that one event itself.
Yeah, and I'll come back to Cirque, Abe,
Yeah,
in just
okay.
a minute. But yes, I think the point you're raising is that we're losing opportunities, and but we're also using the site.
Yeah.
And that's really the issue that I want to make sure gets addressed. And I just wanted to see if the county staff had any questions about the request. And I know Dr. Smith, and I don't think Miguel's on. So I'll turn to John Mills to say, John, is there any questions you have about that request?
Not that I have, Supervisor Chavez. I understand the request, so I think that it's one that we can entertain for January.
Thank you. And then to go back to the point that Abe, that you raised about Cirque du Soleil, it's not just the 700,000 now, it's creating this long-term relationship with them that we're very interested in. Because as Glenn raised earlier, as we look at parking and if we have to put out any kind of revenue bonds, this is exactly the kind of activity we're going to want we can invest in, right? So my question is on this one, who is the lead on the county side of trying to keep Cirque at the fairgrounds?
I don't think that there's been any designation of anybody from the county side. That has been an FMC activity. I know I haven't been party to any of the discussions or conversations with Cirque.
Thank you. And I don't mean for us to have separate conversations with Cirque. What I'm really asking is who on the county side is working with Abe to make it possible for us to keep Cirque. And so Mr. Mills, a request that I am making now through you to Dr. Smith is that we assign somebody whose job it is to help us get Cirque to find a location on our site so that we can maintain that long-term relationship and potentially develop that long-term contract.
We can do that, Supervisor. I'll work with Glenn and Asset and Economic Development to make sure that happens.
Thank you. And to be clear, I'm not asking for us to speak to Cirque. I will add that I think there's been some confusion between the county staff and FMC, and I want to make sure we don't contribute to the confusion. I just want somebody to be able to report, to the whole board, by the way, where we are on Cirque in the next few days. And I know it's a holiday week and they're trying to make a decision. And I think, Abe, you've done a good job of continuing to work with them. So I'd like us not to lose them because I think they're very interested in working with us, or they would have gone already. So I just want to make sure we have somebody whose job it is at the county to help to help keep them. That's really the goal. Thanks, John.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
And then-
Supervisor Chavez, just a comment. I think everybody at the county is desirous of finding a way to help Cirque make that work. It certainly is a benefit to FMC, but it's also a benefit to the county generally. They are a tenant that certainly we would love to be able to retain. I will point out one one obvious fact that gets in the way sometimes, even if the 14-acre site was available for CERC for 2022, the actions that we are entertaining with Cricket, if that were to move forward, they would not be able to make a contract beyond 2022 anyway for that site. So pursuing
to make, I understand that, Glenn, and that's actually exactly my point.
Exactly.
My point is that this really important engagement and our ability to demonstrate flexibility and create options now is critical. And so I absolutely understand that. I think the board understands that. And that's partly why I'm very concerned that we haven't been able to be responsive to CERC now, because my expectation is that we would. For exactly the reason you just said. Exactly.
I'm totally supportive of what you're saying. My point was that it's best that we are actually engaging in that conversation now, rather than actually having it on the 14-acre site for this year and then having to figure it out later. So now is a great time to be doing that.
Thank you. So next, we have been working to move the trains that are on the site. They're sitting in a very critical area. It's not a large site, but it's a really important part of the fairgrounds. And I understand that we have some issues because we're trying to work through them through county council. So I wanted to ask, I don't see James, and I apologize that I can't remember who counsel is for the fairgrounds. Is that person available?
So as a Chavez, this is Steve Mitra from the County Council's office, but Chris Chellington, my colleague, should also be there. Are you there, Chris?
I am here, but I was here listening to the Los Altos Hills Fire District matter. So if I do make comment, it would be on behalf of Fairgrounds Management Corporation, not on behalf of the county.
Understood.
Oh, so what I'm looking for is we have somebody in county council who is working on the contract so that we are able to move the trains. Who is that?
I have not worked on that contract. Mr. Andrade, I don't know do you know if there's a contract to move the trains? I'm not aware of that item.
Well, the contract, so county council has the contract now that they're working through. So somebody in council's office, but we don't have James here either. Okay, so I'm just gonna make this statement and request that we get an off-agenda report from county council about the time frame that contract will be completed, so we are able to proceed with moving those trains. And I'd like to get that prior to our next FGOC meeting. And I recognize this is a hard week. People are traveling and stuff. So no, it is what it is. But I would like to get that off agenda since we're not able to get that response today.
Understood, Supervisor.
Thank you so much. I did want to say to the county staff how much I appreciated getting the off-agenda report relative to the parks, and I'm very excited that we're able to start those discussions. And what I would like to do is ask through Dr. Smith that we get a report to the full board in the first quarter of next year, just to better understand what the park's opportunities are on the site. I know that it's being discussed. I just would want to make sure it stays on a timeline, and the report didn't have enough detail in it for me to understand exactly what to do with that. And I don't believe that Don Rocha is with us. So I'll just make that request before the next meeting. Thank you. One other question, and again, this may be something that can't be answered because we don't have counsel here, but I understood that the board, and this was actually one of the reasons I was asking about the lease issue earlier, was that the board approved an approach in 2018 to request that we start to get market rate rents from our tenants, and that the FMC board has taken a different position from the Board of Supervisors relative to that subject. So what I'm interested in getting from staff is an off-agenda report that reports on whether or not, when the board has made a policy decision with our contractor at FMC, which is the corporation, whether or not they are able to, frankly, not follow the board's direction since we're the holder of the contract. And or if we need to make changes to the current FMC contract to make it clear to the FMC board the direction that the board has taken. So again, given that we don't have primary count, unless Chris, this is, oh, yeah, Chris, maybe you represent FMC. Okay, so I'm not going to put you on the spot, but can we get an off-agenda report? And if it must be confidential, that's fine. But I'd also like to have a discussion in our January meeting about how to address this issue relative to policy disagreements. Mr. Mitra, is that possible?
Yes, Supervisor, that's possible. My understanding is that we've been working on it and that we will get you something and within your time frame.
Oh, great, good. I just didn't remember if I'd asked that question, so thank you.
So Chavez, just to point out one piece of information, any long-term leases do have to come back to the Board of Supervisors for approval, and they do. Because the county is the holder of the property. So ultimately the board has final say. I will get you more details in the memo that deal with the leases of various lengths, but that is a fact as well.
That's an important point. I really appreciate that, Steve. I think what was a little concerning to me is that we weren't formally notified that the board decided to take a different path. And frankly, but for getting emails from that were generated, I imagine, by some of the leaseholders, I don't think I would have known that they had done something different. So I just want to make sure that relationship is very clear. Our relationship with the board of the FMC Corporation is very clear. And frankly, that it creates a little more clarity for the leaseholders too. So thanks for raising that, Steve. That's an excellent point. Very good. So those are all my questions. And I guess the last thing I just want to say, because I just asked you every hard question under the sun, is to make this comment. I am thrilled about how we're moving with Cricket USA. I want to say a very special thank you to Dr. Smith and to the entire team working on the earthquakes. And I will also say that I want us to move as quickly as possible. I know that we have another emerging opportunity at the fairgrounds, and all of this is dependent on these leases and these relationships being exercised in the short term, not just in the long term. So with that, and Glenn, I just and to Abe, I just really want to say that this is the first time in maybe 10 years where we have an opportunity to really move the fairgrounds in a different direction, and one that I think is really respectful of the community that lives in that area, but also recognizes that with a county as large as ours, these large pieces of property really need to be prioritized for community use. And and I'll just say that none of it is moving fast enough for me, but that's because it's my job to be impatient. So, but anyway, thank you to all the staff. Thank you, Chair Lee.
Thank you. The one questions I have is that our office received about 200 emails about sending the Clara paintball, Ms. Williams. would any of these negotiations impact that program at all?
Not directly, not the earthquakes nor, the American cricket. However, FMC, of course, would be the best person to answer all of that for you.
Well, let me, President Lee, or Chairperson Lee, the reason I was asking the question about, so first of all, paintball's a lease that we have.
Mhm.
And the reason I was asking about the full rate for the lease is that paintball is one of the organizations that is not paying the full rate. The Board of Supervisors in 2018 asked the FMC board to charge everybody the full rate. And they did not do that with paintball. So I think part of the reason those are being kicked up again is that they're in lease negotiations, or Abe, maybe you can talk about the timing of that.
Yes, we are currently meeting, we will be in meetings over the next couple of weeks with paintball to negotiate the pricing of the license fee for the use of the 6 acres that they have on the property. Unfortunately, I think the message that went out from paintball owners that we were closing, and at no time have there been any conversations or presentations that we were proposing to close the facility, but we will be meeting with them to propose a new fee for 2022.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. Appreciate that. And I'll go and open up the public hearing at this point. How many people do we have right now sign up for speaking on this item?
We currently have no request to speak.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. I'll give it a few more seconds. If nobody shows up, then I'll go ahead and close up the public hearing.
Oh, we do have a couple of requests. that have
Okay,
come
go
in.
ahead. Yeah, so go ahead.
All right, I will start. First speaker is Loretto. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Loretto Quevedo Di Mandal. I'm the founder and community organizer for Loretto Cuties Brigade Silicon Valley, and also a core leadership team of the Coalition for the In-House in Santa Clara Valley in Silicon Valley. Would like to request the Board of Supervisors to set aside a portion of the unused land to be used for the in-house for safe encampment, for safe parking, temporary housing, and all sorts of stuff, and also facility or the pavilion to be used as a hub for social services, for assessments, for medical and mental health checkups and referrals and other stuff related to the in-house in Santa Clara County. We need a lot of housing, whether temporary or permanent. And also, we don't want any more deaths in our county regarding the in-house. It's a humanitarian crisis that we have of homelessness. So please make sure that the in-house are not forgotten in the use of the Santa Clara County Fairgrounds. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Kumar Mehta. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you very much. I wanted to thank the Board of Supervisors for the opportunity to speak. I want to mention about that how the fairground facility has been utilized past 6 months. In past 6 months, there has been, first of all, the facility has been utilized for the COVID-19 pandemic situation, addressing the pop-up community and a drive-through sites. And prior to that, the fairgrounds facility has been utilized for the different cultural festival and events. Now, in order to address some of the significance that what fairground brings is that it is not just a facility where the sports activities to be conducted. It is also a place where the cultural festivals, different diversified and cultural activities to be taken place. And as a part of Fairgrounds Management Commission's report, there has been a conduct of activity that has been ongoing prior to the COVID-19 situation. As per the required statutory laws and the regulation that is required to maintain the Fairgrounds Management facility, the Commission has the reports that how they have been planning the activities and managing the fairgrounds, and what are the revenues that has been accumulated and being earned out of that. So would be the case that the commission has been reporting that to the Board of Supervisors as well. However, what would become more important is that, how the facilities would be better managed in terms of there are more sports facilities within the city of San Jose and as well as within the county of Santa Clara around the fairgrounds. So it is important to evaluate that how the further that the facility be urbanized and be utilized, as well as there is a lot of management scope to be improved. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Phillip Snyder. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Timer will start when you begin speaking. And Phillip, if you unmute yourself, you'll be able to speak. One more try. One more try for Phillip to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, guys. My name is Phillip Snyder. I'm an extra help worker here at O'Connor's Hospital. Many extra help workers play a significant role here. We are here to service the community with our skills, our flexibility, and teamwork and loyalty. I feel that we are equally important as the individuals who are coded in. I am a husband and a new father of a baby boy. This extra help position at O'Connor's is not temporary, rather a lifelong job. Becoming permanent coded would bring peace of mind to and provide job security for me. About my future, I am adaptable, reliable, and take a genuine interest in this job. I would appreciate the opportunity to become coded and show the value I provide to the county and continue to grow with you guys. I hope the extra help workers as myself would be considered for the permanent positions that needed to be filled. And I would like to thank you guys all for your time.
Our next speaker is Todd Langton. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. Timer will start when you begin speaking.
Yes, hi, Todd Langton, co-founder of Agape, Silicon Valley, unhoused advocate. I have to say I'm just shocked that we've had so many acres of barren land sit empty for so many years, for at least a decade. What does that say about our county, that we cannot take care of a humanitarian crisis that we have right at our hands? We need to call an emergency order, emergency crisis. The COVID is striking up again. Let's take care of our unhoused. We should be able to have at least 10, 20, 30 acres in the fairgrounds for transitional housing, and use the pavilion for a service center like an Ellis Island type of situation where we pull all our resources together and help us take care of our unhoused, get them back on track towards leading a normal life. We have turned Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County has turned into a soulless, immoral society when we can't take care of those who are most vulnerable. What does that say about us? You can't continue to kick this can down the road. You've neglected the unhoused for many, many years. I am so curious, Cindy Chavez, why are you so protective of the fairgrounds? What is in it for you personally? Why can't we open that up at least temporarily for the next year or so and take care of our unhoused? They're dying needlessly. And it's shameful. We have one of the worst homeless situations, unhoused situations in the entire state, if not the entire country. Have we become a soulless, immoral society right here in Silicon Valley, the wealthiest community in the entire country? It's on your shoulders. History will judge you. What sort of legend, what sort of legacy will you guys leave after your terms are all out and finished? Thank you.
And that concludes our request to speak.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing on this one. And at this point, Supervisor Chavez, do you have any further comments or ready for motion?
I will make a motion with all of the requests that were made during this discussion.
And to receive the report. Right.
Yes.
Okay. And I'll go and second that. I'll go ahead and let's call for the vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. The report has been received, plus all the actions that's been mentioned earlier. Moving on to item number Okay, 5, we already dealt with on the consent calendar. So we go to item number 6, which is receiving report from the Employee Services Agency relating to recruitment and classification performance metrics. And
Thank
here to present this report, I believe, is our director for ESA, John Mills. John, are you here?
Yes, that is correct. Here I am, Chairperson Lee and Vice Chairperson Chavez. Good afternoon. This report is in follow-up to the budget workshop discussion related to performance metrics. We include progress on our goal of referring candidates to departments within 90 days of receiving a requisition. The data shows that we improved on that goal, referring candidates within 90 days 86.5% of the time in FY 2020 and 90.7% of the time in FY 2021, with an average time to referral of 37 days. We also include progress on the implementation of our classification studies database and case management system, which will allow us to track the classification study workflow and provide us with robust data for analysis against performance metrics, as is the case with our applicant tracking system for recruitment data. And we also describe in the report the data that we've gathered from the initial implementation period of the countywide employee exit survey, which was another request of the board during the June budget process. So with that overview, I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you for the information. Vice Chair Chavez, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. So first, John, I do just want to say thank you for the report. I think one of the one issue that was raised in the report that I thought was really important to understand was the volume of activity for the department. I thought that was very informative. You know, one question that I would have is that based on this report, it appears that ESA is on track, but that the departments aren't on track in terms of responsiveness and speed and all of that. And I'm curious if that's the aha that I should be getting from the report.
Well, I mean, my take on that would be that it varies from department to department, from hiring manager to hiring manager, from HR liaison to HR liaison who we work with in the departments. There are some, departments and individuals who are involved in the hiring process from the department end who have more experience working with us, working with our personnel system, who are more sophisticated in dealing with our processes. And I think those departments are frankly more successful in navigating the process. What we are doing to address that, Supervisor, is we have implemented a fairly robust training program for hiring managers and HR liaisons in the departments. And we've had a number of cohorts go through our training program, and we've gotten very good feedback on that. And it helps us to have a more productive relationship with those departments so that we can hit the ground running faster with their hiring managers and HR liaisons, and particularly individuals who maybe haven't recruited for a position before or are new to the HR liaison role in their department. The training program definitely helps equip them to work well with us.
So John, one just thought I would have on that is that I'm not sure the department heads would have the same takeaway that I did from the report. And so one perspective that I think might be of value would be to do something more in the range of a 360 of the department, so that you're able to get feedback from the departments that's more honest and less, because one thing that, whether it's true or not, they all have a fear of upsetting ESA, and that's been going on, I don't know, from the beginning of time. That's not John, that's not you. That was when I came here in 1990, that was the rap. So I wonder, is that something that you've already taken a look at? And the reason, here's what I'm asking, John, there are two things I'm asking. I'm asking, one is if anonymity with department heads and hiring managers would help refine the experience on both sides of the aisle, and then what could be improved. But the second thing that I've been thinking about is that you've made some pretty dramatic changes in the department over the last, I don't know, really 3-4 years. And it might be time to do a 360 to determine how on track, the approaches that you're taking. And I think to better understand almost I'm not going to use the proper term, but almost an assessment of the confidence of the departments too, in terms of the new process. Is that something you've considered?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I would sort of preface my response to your comments with a little bit of background. You may be aware that we have conducted 3 times now a client satisfaction survey that goes out to several thousand.
So Michelle, do you want me to ask
respondents.
about this delay in the classification?
Supervisor Lee, you're not on mute. Yeah, I am aware of that, but isn't that a survey done internally by us?
So yeah. So we send it out to everyone who has registered for access to our recruitment dashboard, which you might be familiar with.
Which I love. That's something that maybe at our next meeting, it's worth showing it again. I don't even mean here, but I mean for a board meeting.
Yeah, and I appreciate the kudos, and I do want to take the opportunity to thank our internal data team who worked to put that together, our change management team, and our HR analysts and HR staff who have all been partners in that effort. But so we do have a fairly robust survey program that we actually pride ourselves on being not anonymous in terms of asking people to respond, to actually rate their interaction with their HR analysts so that we can get the candid feedback. But I do see your point about, specifically the department heads and kind of sort of carving out that group for maybe some more focused attention and interaction in terms of a 360 type model.
And John, I would even argue that there's some benefit to doing that with the hiring managers as well, and only for this reason, which is that, one of the strains that we hear, and I'll to be frank, we still get a lot of feedback about, as I know you do too, about the speed of hiring, the quality of the list that comes, whether or not there's clarity between the department and ESA, and frankly, ESA perhaps getting a little out of its lane in terms of understanding the content of the body of work that needs to be done, and therefore pushing for recruitments that may be where the department feels like they don't have an option when they're dealing with you all because you're the administration to them. And that's a kind of thing that I think the only way to kind of, or to rectify that, or even to better understand if it is a real problem or a perceived issue, is to create the space for people to engage. And I do think, I think a third party approach is one that everybody would just benefit from. And I think it's specifically because you have some old data, and you have some department leaders that have been here a long enough time to have seen the change. You have some that are going to come newer, that are going to have different experience, and some that have been with the organization and moved up. So I think you're going to have a really well-rounded group of people. And I would talk to the hiring managers as well, because I think that creating space, not for people to be mean-spirited or anything like that, but to give very structured feedback as to the new processes you have and where you're getting complaints about time as well, because anyway, I just think I think you're in a good space to do that, because I think it will help you determine how you want to continue to move forward and whether or not you want to make any changes to the approaches that you're already moving down.
Yeah, absolutely. We welcome any and all opportunities to engage and to receive that constructive criticism and feedback, because the back and forth and the dialogue, as you mentioned, definitely helps inform our process improvement efforts and just helps us be better at what we do in terms of trying to deliver services to departments and understand where they're coming from. So we would certainly welcome opportunities like you described to get that feedback. So that is something we will definitely look into.
So I would recommend this come to the full board, and when it does, that you have at least an approach, John. And if you opt for not to do it, I just would want to know why and what approach you may recommend. And that brings me to kind of another area that I want to think a lot about relative to staff morale. And so I really appreciated you putting in the data of the almost 200 people who did respond to the exit interviews. And one thing I would say is I think that's a high number. I'm also curious about how we get the other, 1,300 employees who left in that period of time to get a bigger swath of them responding. And one thing that I want to recommend is that you think about some sort of a stipend for the response, because I given the paperwork that people go through when they leave with us, especially if they're going into retirement, but if they're leaving for something else, I guess it's a shorter process for them. And I think that there could be, again, really significant benefit to getting a more fulsome response, because I think if we were able to get a bigger chunk, I think you'd be able to see trends via department that could be very informative in terms of morale, training, to dig into when someone says they didn't have a good experience, was that, to better understand what that is. I thought the one that was most interesting was, to be frank, was the one about where people said that the benefits were a concern for them. Because I thought, wow, like that's the one thing, if you were outside our organization, people think, oh my goodness, the public sector has so many benefits. So that was one that I would have been curious about, because the question I would have been curious about there is childcare. Is that an issue? And if it's not, that'd be good to know too. I thought the other one on telework was interesting too, like the inability to work telework. And again, that to be able to look at those trends over a number of years would be more impactful if we created, if we had more people responding. So even if that was a small cash incentive or a gift card incentive, something that would fall within the legal appropriate parameters of a gift, and especially if it was from us, but for completing that survey, I think the amount of information we get from that would be invaluable.
Sure. No, I appreciate that suggestion. And it's something that we've thought about in terms of how to incentivize, individuals as they're going through the offboarding process to complete the survey, which, as isn't required for them to leave county employment. And so, definitely some of the suggestions that you made are ones that we will look into in terms of bringing that participation rate up.
The other thing is, if we had a third party evaluator, it would be worth them taking a sub percentage, like maybe 5 or 10%, and doing actual interviews instead of a survey. Again, I just think, both, all of us, and I know, John, this is something you feel really strongly about. We want people to love where they work and really love being a part of this family. And I think that sometimes people on their way out are going to be the most candid with us, and we should, and if it's a third party and they know they're not going to get, that they won't get a bad review for another job, that would just be huge for us. Huge. And it might help, because on one of them it said, they were leaving for another reason. Other could, I think childcare is on my brain right now, but other could be childcare for them versus a benefit for, it's hard to know how that would be determined. So those are all my questions. Thank you, Chair. And thanks, John. I appreciated the report.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, Clerk, do we have any public who would like to speak on this item?
Yes, we do. We do have a couple speakers. The next speaker is Jason Dorsey. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you. I really appreciated that conversation. And I want to say, John, I think that as I'm Vice President of SEIU, I've seen great improvements on the ESA side of this process. But what happens, I think, is it crashes into a wall when it hits the departments. And I'll just speak kind of briefly about, I've seen massive recruitments happen for some of our lower level, entry level type positions. Hundreds and hundreds of janitors get interviewed for 30 openings and they hire 6. There's multiple, interviews that happen for these people and they don't get hired. There's got to be a broken piece to that chain. So, and currently in facilities and fleet where I work, I know that there was a recruitment that happened recently where we have candidates that are waiting right now to even get their background check done. They haven't even received the paperwork to get the background check. Once they get, and it's been 2 months. Once that happens, it can take 3 to 4 months to onboard them. So there's some broken pieces. And I think that one of the pieces, I have done a lot of work with ESA in the last few years over, specs and classifications and everything like that. So I've learned a lot and I've seen a lot of improvements, like I said, but things like this cause the people that are actually at work dealing with the problems that don't get fixed by bringing on more staff to become disgruntled. And that's what I hear, right? So like I said, I know you've done a lot of work, but I think that it'd be a good idea to maybe push improvement in the training for the departmental staff of this side, not say, hey, we're having a class. If you want to come, make it mandatory for them because they just don't know that your process has changed. And I think that it's time for everybody to learn. So that's all I got. Thank you, guys.
The next speaker is Lisa Merrill. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking. Lisa, Lisa has just dropped off the line. The next speaker is Johanna. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Yes, hi, my name is Joanna Tapia. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist for behavioral health in Santa Clara County. I am also a chief steward for the behavioral health and substance abuse department. I would like to speak in this, in this topic because I hear a lot of demoralized staff right now that are also considering leaving the county, which is very unfortunate, right? In the behavioral health department alone, we have noticed a few barriers in the hiring process. And a few of those barriers, which right now we've noticed, is that when applicants apply for the positions, they come in thinking they're going to be working a certain role. And then when they're interviewed and they talk to the hiring managers, that changes. And they're basically being informed that they would be more of a floater, but they don't use the word floater. It's more of cross-trained, which is very impactful if you have a caseload, right? So that's very difficult. And another barrier that we have noticed is a lot of miscommunication in the hiring process. Just the managers themselves, there's staff that wanted to transfer to another position and they're told, no, that's not available. But then later we find out that position was vacant and they could have actually applied for it, which is a complete demoralizer as well. And then the opportunities to move up and promote, it seems like they're only being offered to staff their favorites of the managers, which is another hit for the staff that are working hard right now, working several roles, doing their best for the community and not getting really, they're not getting recognized for their hard work. Another thing too that's we've noticed are pushing staff out is this whole idea of when the management says we cannot fill certain positions, they're
The next speaker is Andrea Whalen. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name's Andrea Whelan, and I am an investigator with the Medical Examiner's Office. And I just want to say that this report, I don't think is a true representation of the staffing needs, at least not for our office. I think that, my goal is to go ahead and bring to light the increased workload that's been causing a negative work environment for county workers working now. The report's misleading in that it reflects budgeted positions early in the pandemic, and our office has been greatly affected by that. We have 11 frontline investigators that serve the county 24/7. And in 2019, this time, in December, we had over 3,500 deaths that were reported. And in 2020, it was 4,600. And I'm sure COVID had some effects on that. But in 2021, we have over 5,100 deaths that have been reported to our office. And this increased workload has negated our work environment. We do have coworkers looking elsewhere for jobs. Our overtime's discouraged. We've had a breakdown in our vacation bidding. We've got management encouraging people to take trades and shifts rather than days off because we just don't have the staff for coverage. We've actually had coworkers denied vacation. And we are afraid to use our sick time because it impacts our coworkers. And this, of course, is affecting the services to the community. Our phone wait times, our delays in reporting deaths are increased. Death certificates have been extended in our queues. And honestly, with all these things impacted and funeral homes having to wait, it seems like that there's no light at the end of the tunnel. So I just want to say that, please take this report into consideration, but at the same time, realize it's not a true reflection of what's happening right now. And I think that coming ahead, you're going to see that there's a lot of disgruntled people, and we really do need more staffing, especially in the areas that have been greatly affected by the pandemic, like the medical examiner coroner's office. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ubush Kumar Mehta. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you very much to the Board of Supervisors and as well as the rest of the county staff. I think the employees, as a part of a Board of Employee Services, it is important that the employee services for the people and for the organization. Now let's take a look at that, what employee service could provide. They provide the programs, benefits, policy direction, leadership in designing, developing, implementing the human resource systems and program for the recruitment, pay, leave, performance management and recognition, employee development and work-life wellness program. So would be the case that on instances, it is important that the accountability and a workforce relations that becomes very important and becomes vital at certain stage. On our labor relations, it becomes more and more vital that the labor management relations statute to help maintain good relation among, not just among the agencies, however, with the labor organization and employees. And employees are the accountability that reviews the third-party decisions for the consistency with the civil service, laws, rules, and regulation and advices within the structure of a government. These are the vitals of the ESAs in terms of a government relations and the agencies they are operating as a government relations. What becomes even more important is that when government operates, there are different government structurization and employees as well. For example, the veteran services, when any veterans is required to be hired and transitioning from military service to a civil service related to their family, their spouses, they also required a similar government-wide leadership and a direction on the employment opportunities. So would be the case that ESA is to improve upon the opportunities which are not just focused on the government area, however, affiliated to each and every agencies, non-profit, government, military, to be affiliated with the ESA as well. Thank you.
The next speaker is Fabian Ramos. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hello, my name is Fabian Ramos. I've been an employee with Valley Medical Center Protective Service with the county since 2001. It is my understanding the county has challenges filling certain vacancies. This does not really tell the whole story of worker burnout. We had many full-time codes vacated within the last couple of years, leaving several of us asking, why aren't these filled? Have these codes been deleted or frozen? These last few years, staffing training has gotten progressively worse. Rather than having full-time positions, we have been left with extra help who barely commit to 2 days of work per week. Training officers such as I find ourselves training extra help, working overtime to help depleted staffing levels on all shifts. Extra help is a temporary band-aid to a leaking dam. In-house training has been shortened, leaving more in-depth training, such as report writing, de-escalating training, left to the responsibility of our field training officers with a limited window. Our yearly mandatory use of force training has been completed only twice within the last 11 years that the sheriffs have been managing us. This is very detrimental to the department, leaving room for error and costly mistakes, such as civil liability and or termination. These are serious challenges for recruiting and retaining qualified staff in the county. I ask that you, county, ensure proper training for new hires and fill or add back these full-time codes. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Merrill. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Okay, I'm here now. Hi, my name is Lisa Merrill. I've been a 911 dispatcher at County Communications for 20 years. In that time, we've never been fully staffed. We are coded for 80 plus positions. We have 54 dispatcher codes filled right now and 11 on probation. Our success rate for training is below 40%, even with an extended 18-month probationary period. Critical staffing has been an issue for 9 years when mandatory overtime was instituted. In that time, we have not made progress in the amount of forced overtime. We work an average of an extra 3 months in a 12-month period. That's an extra 2 years of service for mandatory overtime. What we need are, I don't have much time here. What we need to retain dispatchers is we need longevity pay increases, service credit for forced time, and a retirement formula recognizes public safety employees. We need directors and managers that want to work together to find real solutions. In the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to lose 20% of our current workforce. So the county is headed in a major emergency services disaster if we can't work together to solve the staffing and retention issues at County Communications. Again, the big issue is we need to work with managers and directors that want to work together. Thank you.
And that concludes our request to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And Supervisor Chavez, do we have a motion?
Yeah, first I wanted to just give John an opportunity to respond. And you know, if there are issues that were raised that I think you might want to just weigh in on, John, and then I'll turn to Dr. Smith just for a question.
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez. I think, you know, I would just say in general, I do think some of the comments that the speakers raised pointed to the utility of the training program that I had discussed when I was presenting the item earlier. And so we definitely are investing a lot of time and effort and resources into making that available to the extent possible to HR liaisons and hiring managers to help support them through our process, and also for us to be able to help support them with their end of the process in terms of interviewing and selecting and onboarding candidates. I will comment that I think some of the other remarks by some of the speakers, I think, might have been in reference to the next item, which is the countywide vacancy report, because I know there were some comments related to staffing and departments and workload, and I think those might have been intended to be directed towards that report.
And thank you for pointing that out, John. I appreciate it. I think you know, one thing that I am curious about is, can everybody in the county access the dashboard you're using?
They could if they wanted to. It's a matter of sending us a request, and then they get the access through, it's like a SharePoint site through Power BI, which is a Microsoft application that the county uses.
You know, one thing, and this goes actually something I was going to mention to Dr. Smith too, is that One thing I would recommend is that should actually be on your site and people should just be able to look at it because I think it takes a lot of the mystery away. And I think the point that one of the speakers raised that when they're asking a question about whether or not a position is frozen or not, or whether or not there's an active recruitment going on, that if they're able to garner that information themselves, there's less mystery. And frankly, they can be more better advocates at a grassroots level because sometimes I think it's not clear who's responsible for the particular activity or inactivity. And one other point that I think is being raised right now is the overlap between ESA and labor relations. And that distinction is so gray in my mind that it must be really gray to most of the folks who are even listening to this discussion today. So, we'll dive more into that in the next area. But Dr. Smith, the thing I had mentioned to John before you joined us was to make sure that when this comes to the full board, I'd love it if we could make sure, one, it's not on consent, but two, that we asked for some additional strategies and information that I think are going to be able to highlight the work that's already being done in ESA. That I am hopeful that will excite you in terms of being able to really pinpoint what in the direction we're going in is really helping, and what in the direction we're going in is something we still need to take a look at relative to not both ESA and the hiring partners within within the county.
Not BTA. Yeah, we can certainly make sure that we bring it on regular and go through a more in-depth look. As terms of having the website available, or the information available on the website, I don't know that BTI can do that, but we'll figure out a way to get it on there so that everybody can see updated material about where recruitments are and what positions are open and what's not open and whether something's available and funded or not. So we can make sure that happens through IT or TSS.
And Dr. Smith, would ESA know where we have agencies that have, for example, I think the chronic overtime and dispatch is a really good example of something that has been going on a really long time. And there's some complexities there, I know, but like that's an interesting example of what role, if any, does like how does your office get alerted to those kinds of things now, and what permissions are needed, if any, internally to move into kind of a chronic overtime plan outside of budget?
The deputy county executive who supervises that part of the organization keeps us informed about what's going on. And as you point out, we've had problems with county comm staffing for at least 10 years. And we've tried numerous approaches to try to improve that. And it's a multifactorial issue. Part of it is the fact that there's a large training time period to get up to, high performer. Not that anybody is a problem, but it's a very intense job. So it requires a lot of training. And part of it is also that there are not a lot of people out there who are qualified that make the background, who are also interested. So we've been trying numerous approaches, and we're continuing to try every approach that we can think of. I think the public speaker pointed out that it's not going to be a quick solution. Obviously, it's been going on for years, and it's something that's true of essentially every dispatch unit in California, particularly in the Bay Area. So we'll keep pushing as far as we can. In terms of mandatory overtime, we make that decision through administration based on need.
So I guess what I would think of for the dashboard is I do think it would be important for us to be able to highlight departments that are using have mandatory overtime, that we should be able to light up those particular subsets. I think, you know, both that and I think we're going to see this in behavioral health. We already are, as Iona was raising, and also I hadn't realized the workload challenges in the coroner medical examiner's office, but I think, you know, all of those are areas that that are worthy of looking at. But I think for the board and for you, Dr. Smith, just given the size of the organization, you know, having a way to look at that and look at that over a number of years, because I think with dispatch in particular, you know, I'll just say that I think one area for dispatch, and it's an area for the sheriff's department as well, and probably the correctional officers are impacted by this too, is how available we have, how many people we have available to do background checks and the speed of those background checks.
Recording in progress. Recording stopped.
I don't
Whoops,
know.
something bad happened.
Yeah. Anyway,
I keep updated on a weekly basis with everything that's going on. But yes, I think we can highlight that for the public so that we know where we're having overtime problems. And it typically is in the 24-hour required services. So hospital, county comm, detention, police, places where you know, you absolutely have to have somebody working. You can't decrease the workload artificially. So we'll make sure that that's available for you.
And then the other thing is on the background check issue, could you, through Dr. Smith to John, could you all do an assessment of how long on average it's taking us to get through background checks for dispatch and anything relative to public safety? Because I imagine we do background checks for correctional officers, sheriffs, medical examiner would be my guess, and dispatch. I don't know if we do that for any other, you know, anybody else, but any place we're doing a background check, I think if that, depending on how much time that adds, we should be looking at how to address that in particular. So thank you, this was very helpful.
We'll get to that information. Yeah.
Thank you. Supervisor Chavez, do you have a ready written motion?
Yes, I will make a motion to receive the report with the requested information coming to the board concurrent to this report coming to the board, and that this item be kept off consent. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll second that. And no further comments. Let's take a roll call vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes, thank you.
And Chairperson Lee.
Aye as well.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to item number 7, which is to receive report again from ESA and also OBA Office of Budget Analysis and the County Executive regarding to countywide vacancy report and recruitment status of funded vacant positions. And John, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chairperson Lee. This is the annual countywide vacancy report that includes the recruitment status of funded vacant positions. The vacancy rate roughly tracks with last year's vacancy rate at this time, although we have added 709 positions since the beginning of this fiscal year. The remainder of the report shows vacancy rate and recruitment status of funded vacancies by department. And there is a lot of detailed information in the report on a department by department basis, but with that broad overview, we're available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And Supervisor Chavez, do you have any questions on this?
I do, but perhaps we should hear from the public first, and then Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. And for those who have spoken on this issue already regarding vacancy report previously, I would ask that you refrain from speaking again. This is the same issue. And I'll go ahead and open a public hearing. How many individuals have registered to speak, clerk?
There is currently one request to speak.
Okay, please go ahead.
The next speaker is Jason Dorsey. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, Jason Dorsey, Chapter Vice President, SEIU. So looking at that report for all that overall staffing, to me seems like it's insufficient for a real assessment of what the staffing needs are. If I look at that, if I just look at HHS, for instance, there's an overall number, but that doesn't tell me how many janitors you need or how many doctors you need. So my belief would be it needs to be broken down more categorized by departments and by classifications so that you can totally understand where the need is. Or do we need people at the coroner's office? Do we need janitors, like I said? Do we need mechanics? What is it that we need to keep the hospital running? And I don't think that list breaks it down good enough for anybody to assess it. That's all I got.
The next speaker is Johanna. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Yes, I would agree with the previous speaker. This report does not actually give you a full scope of the percentages of vacant staff who are actually providing the services to the community. I would like to inform that over 45% of the positions at this time, or at least in behavioral health, are for management positions. Again, not reflecting the need for field positions in this report. Also, I would like to remind you all that the county has deleted the positions of the employees who left when COVID happened. When they accepted the voluntary separation opportunity. These positions were deleted, which will not show in the report either. However, the need for these positions is still there. The staff in the community are being impacted by the lack of staff because services are being thinned out to the community during a time of high need. So the information here doesn't really show the need, I guess, that we have right now for the field staff, and instead management continues to hire more managers to help them out, whereas the field staff is continuing to be overwhelmed, overworked, and not able to meet the community needs. So we ask for this for the visa positions to be reestablished. Thank you.
And that concludes our request to speak.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Supervisor Travis, do you have any questions or ready for motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of observations. One is I do think that this should be a much more detailed report. I think it's what I was asking for on the chronic overuse of overtime. This reflects an example of how hard it is to look at this and know where we are overall and which of the positions stand out because they're just really hard to serve. And to be frank with you, we see them sometimes through different departments' perspectives, but we don't see it on a whole. And John, I wonder now, what tool do you have so that you and your staff are able to see that broken down? And is that something that you are looking at countywide that both you and Dr. Smith have access to?
Well, we can definitely see like by department and then by classification in the department. So to the point that one of the public speakers was making about, say looking within a particular budget unit like the hospital, but then breaking it down by janitors or physicians or clinical nurses or health service representatives and seeing the vacancies in each of those separate classifications within the department. We can definitely do that. I think we would need to get with the budget office to cross-reference the overtime usage that you're talking about, and then match that with departments in terms of their vacancy rates and which classifications those are, if we wanted to have that more comprehensive report, because there definitely is a budgetary piece to this as well that goes beyond the personnel piece.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that. This report's only intended to tell where the vacancies are. It's not intended to tell where the needs are. Each year, actually multiple times through the year during the budget reconciliation, we ask all the departments to give us their best idea of where they need resources and what types of resources they need. And that's where in the budget, where we assign positions based on the need. So just for the public's understanding, I would not presume that an empty position means that position's actually needed to do that job. We have lots of, quote, leftover empty positions in areas which don't really need any other services. So, for example, I'll point out, just to be obvious about it, there's a 23% vacancy rate in District Supervisor District 4. Now, I don't know if they need, 16 positions filled, but we rely upon the department head, who is the supervisor, to tell us whether they need that. But looking just at the percentage doesn't really tell us a whole lot, except that there are 3 vacant positions. Same is true of all the departments.
One request I would make is that when this comes to the full board, if you could attach the analysis that you currently have an opportunity to look at, so it's really broken down a little bit more by classification, I think that would be really helpful. And helpful to the board, but also helpful again to the public to see where we think there are deficits. And I think, Dr. Smith, that point you raise is such a good one, because it means that at every budget cycle, I know you do this, where you remove codes that we're no longer using or positions we're no longer using, because then it just makes it more clear and more transparent, what our needs are. So I would appreciate that. And then the other thing I'm very interested in understanding is, we had a referral related to recruitment, reclassification, and the safety of our nursing staff. And can you respond to where that referral is in process?
John could give you an update on that.
Yeah, Supervisor Chavez, I know part of that referral was a request for an off-agenda report that's supposed to come before the end of this month, that related to at least the recruitment piece. I know there were other aspects to the referral related to workplace safety, but at least related to the recruitment piece, for a timeline to engage the recruiting firm that would assist us with the nursing recruitments. And so that off-agenda report is in progress and will be distributed to the board before the end of this month. And then there were other aspects of the referral that requested information to come back as part of the mid-year budget that was related to turnover and vacancies, specifically in the nursing classifications. And so that's on schedule as well.
And on the safety piece, is that coming back at the same timeline?
Yes, okay. There are various aspects of the safety piece as well, also on the same timeline.
John, when the referral comes to us at the end of the month relative to the recruitment, could you just add a couple sentences about when we should expect the other pieces, just as a reminder?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And I have no other, well, the only other thing I wanted to ask on it is just again, it's an overall question, but when this comes back with more detailed like, here's where we have our vacancies, one thing is if we are looking at departments where there's a high level of need and then a high level of emphasis on recruitment, one of those I know with behavioral health, I think their vacancy rate is almost 19 or 20% right now. Does that sound right to you?
I think so, Supervisor. I can look and see at least what, in the report, it reflects what it was at the end of November.
So again, I think having a more defined breakdown, like I said, would be super helpful, because I think some things we're going to have to we have to take a look at even different types of recruiting as well, and joint recruiting, and maybe, working with the line staff to determine, and the whole department to determine how we're going to meet some of these needs. Because I think, trying to get more clinicians, we need a plan, like a real plan to get them. Like what we're doing now isn't working per se. So if we could have that detail too, then at least we could have that conversation with the board. So thank you. Thanks, Shirley.
Yeah, I've got the numbers for you. 19% vacancy in the Department of Behavioral Health, and that accounts for 6% of the total county vacancies. And what you're asking for is a breakdown of where those vacancies are, and we'll be happy to get that. I can tell you that out of those vacancies, which total 154, that a fair number of them are non-clinical vacancies. So that would be helpful, I think, to the board and the committee to understand more detail. And I hear you saying that, and that's what we'll get you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff. Really helpful. And those are all my questions.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Chavez. My question I have is regarding the report on the issue of vacancy on the TSS, the Technology Services and Solutions. On the report, it mentions that out of the 163 positions that's vacant, there are 78 vacancies that has no recruitment in progress, which represents about close to 48% that there's no recruitment in progress. Could you comment, John, what's the holdup on it? There's this thing that you mentioned, that there's IT entrance exam, right? That's been created to streamline the recruitment process for IT, which makes a lot of sense. So thanks for stating that. So it will certainly test out people first, make sure they have the proper skill before moving forward, and will not waste everybody's time. But at the same time, could you comment on the issue of why no recruitment progress in such a large percentage of the vacancies? Thank you.
I can comment on that.
Go ahead, Jeff.
John will have some additional comments, but a little bit of history is in order, just to make sure that we put everything on the table. A few years back, we went through an entire reclassification process for TSS. We called it ITCC. And basically, we looked at every classification in the area and changed many of them, and based it on what we thought would be a desired org chart for the operation. Since then, we've realized that org chart probably is heavy on management and administration and executive positions, and we basically feel that many of those recruitments for those management positions are unnecessary. We've consolidated reporting structures and simplified it. So a large fraction of those where there's no recruitment going on have to do with the fact that we no longer think those positions are necessary, and we'll reassign or reassess during budget to eliminate them. John, did you want to add something?
I mean, you captured it very nicely, Jeff. And I would just say for the remaining classifications, and you referenced this as well, Supervisor Lee, that we have developed a prioritization plan with TSS for those recruitments. And one of the strategies that we're using, particularly for IT, to help us recruit multiple classifications in parallel is this new IT entrance exam that we've developed, that is essentially a common test that we can use for multiple IT classifications to have various recruitments moving in parallel.
We'll also add that TSS, like correctional officers, like dispatchers, has particular issues with regard to recruitment. You know, we live in Silicon Valley, and so most of the employees who have the skill sets that we're recruiting for can easily go down the street to Google and make 3 or 4 times as much money and have 5 times more free space, free time. So we have real challenges finding the right person who's committed to the county endeavor and committed to our county service. And obviously we don't pay stock dividends and options and those kinds of things. So it's a constant area of challenge, and we watch it very carefully.
Except I'm going to say, Dr. Smith, that they will never get as good job satisfaction working with us than they work with Google. I just want to say how great our employees are, but thanks for the explanation regarding the issue relating to the potential deletion of some of these overlapping positions. So of the 78 vacancies, you're saying quite a few of these will likely be deleted soon in the next budget proposal that you provide, right, Dr. Smith? Am I correct?
Right. We, like I said, when ITCC was done, the proposed org chart was a little top heavy. And so we will come back and ask for deletions of positions that we no longer think are necessary. We're consolidating responsibilities of the managers.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Smith. Let's see. I think we have opened and closed the public hearing, and I think we've all the questions. And Supervisor Chavez, do I have a motion?
I'll move to receive the report with the request that a more detailed framework come to the board when this comes to the board, that it stays off of consent and that it's tied to this other item so that you don't have to have 2 conversations. We should hear them together.
Right, 6 and 7, right, correct. They should be tied together. Absolutely agree. And I'll second that. No further comments, please vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And moving forward, I think we put on consent the rest, which is 8, 9, 10, and 11. And we move to item number 12. Am I correct?
And after item 12, if I may request that we hear item 20. Item 20, I pulled from consent and just reread a part of it that answered my question.
Okay, we could do that, certainly. Okay, so for item number 12 is receiving report from Facilities and Fleet Department relating to proposed actions and timeline associated with exploring energy and water efficiency opportunities in O'Connor, DePaul, St. Louis, and Santa Clara VMC. And here to represent this report, I believe, is Fleet, which, let's see, our Facilities and Fleet Department. Is it Jeff Draper? Is Jeff here?
Jeff is here, Supervisor, but I'll turn it over to Suzanne Mercado and Lynn Ortega.
Great. Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Lee, Chair Chavez, Mr. Ortega with Facilities and Fleet.
Mr. Ortega, could you speak a little closer to the mic? It's very hard to hear you.
My apologies. Try this one more time. This is Lynn Ortega with Facilities and Fleet. So
yes,
can you hear me better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. On August 31st, the Board of Supervisors issued a referral to the administration requesting that staff provide a report to Finance and Government Operations Committee with an outline of a plan to implement energy and water efficiency opportunities at the recently acquired hospitals, plus also to revisit the Valley Medical Center campus for efficiency opportunities after the current construction activities subsided. So that in mind, what you have in front of you is an outline with 2 phases. The first phase is would entail working with one of the county's engineering energy consultants. This is a consultant that the county already has on board under a professional services agreement. So the consultant would conduct preliminary audits, efficiency audits that is, at the facilities and identify potential measures that the county could implement. For this part of the effort, the staff anticipates that we could complete this by the end of Q3 of next year. More than likely it will be sooner, but just want to make sure that we give ourselves enough time to complete that part of the effort. Phase 2 would then entail the implementation of the identified measures And so for this, staff would utilize one of the previously selected ESCOs. So we would ask the ESCO then to complete the investment grade audits of the measures that were identified in the preliminary audits performed by the county's energy consultant. The implementation of the measures would utilize California Government Code 4217, which you are probably familiar. That is the same code, California contracting code that we utilized for the previous energy efforts that were completed a couple of years back. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. And Supervisor Chavez, do you have any questions for Ms. Ortega? So it's Sarah Chavez, you're still muted? Sorry.
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, I don't have any question at this point as well. I'll go ahead and ask to see, is there anybody in the public that would like to speak today, Clerk?
There are currently no requests to speak.
All right. I'll give it a couple of seconds. And
still none.
None? Okay, all right. Then I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. And I'm ready for a motion. Supervisor Chavez.
Move approval.
And I'll second it as well. And I certainly just want to comment that first, thank staff for this report. I certainly am a strong proponent of saving our environment and saving money and saving resources. And I really do believe that these type of studies would help our large facilities, in this case, all our main hospital assets, to be able to find resources that we could save, and certainly will save us money as well in the long run. So again, I just want to say thank you for the report, and I certainly would be supporting this motion. Ready for a call vote, please?
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you.
All right. And then as Vice Chair Chavez has asked, we're going to move to item 20 first. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes,
I
go ahead.
move approval of receipt of the report.
I will second that as well. Well, since it's up here, I would just ask, is anybody in the public who would like to speak?
There are no requests to speak. Oh, we do have a request to speak. I have. Should we take that now?
Yes, right. Item 20. Go ahead.
The next speaker is Kumar Mehta. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you very much to the Board of Supervisors and as well as the county staff. I want to specifically mention about the way the environmental analysis of the former city of San Jose Hall has been made. As it is, as you know, most of the city hall plazas, you know, the way they have been developed, either they are being adopting the classical or any arbitrary architecture architectural plan for the development of a city hall. So it is important to evaluate that when any asset that is being disposed as a part of a county, or whether it's be a city property, it is important to evaluate that how the perpetual value versus the future value is being estimated, and what are the environmental impacts that is to be adhered when any historical landmark like a city of San Jose Hall that is being disposed. Some of the facts that is to be taken into account is that the historical value, the environment quality impact, whether disposing the asset or rehabilitation of an asset increasing the value within the economic development or not. If the economical cost and the rehabilitation cost for maintaining for the perpetual value of the property that exceeds the future value or the historical value of the property, then it is important to determine that whether to how to maintain the status of that property, and whether disposing of really signifies the asset's value. So having said that, when doing the analysis, some of the points to be taken care of is that the assets are to be maintained and are to be well maintained, since it is already creating to the history and to the economy.
That concludes our request to speak.
I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ready for a vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you.
All right, and then moving to item number I believe 13, right? Yes. And 13 is to receive a report from the Office of Registrar of Voters relating to criteria used to select vote centers and election date vote center activities reported to the Secretary of State for September 14, 2021, California gubernatorial recall elections. And here to present this item, I believe, is the director of the ROV, Shannon Boucher. Is Shannon here today?
Yes, I am. Thank
Hello.
you. Hi.
Hi.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Lee and Vice Chairperson Chavez. Yes, my name is Shannon Boucher, Registrar of Voters, and also online with me, I have Matt Morales, our Assistant Registrar of Voters. And at a previous FGOC meeting, Registrar of Voters, which I may refer to as ROV during the presentation, was asked to report back about vote center selection and observer activities relating to the September recall election. So I'll go ahead and share my screen now. I have 4 slides. Let's see. Okay. Is that viewing now?
Okay, we can see it. Yes, we can see it. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So typically, the Registrar of Voters has over 6 months to prepare for an election, and really like about a year to locate and contract with locations that are used as vote centers. The recall election, though, however, we had a much shorter time frame with less than 3 months from the call of the election to the actual election day. Along with the September recall, Senate Bill 152, which had passed with urgency, set the number of the required vote centers per number of registered voters, for this recall election. And this resulted in the requirement for our county to have 34 vote centers. However, we were able to contract with additional vote centers to have a total of 36 vote centers, which surpassed the required number by the state. Let me move my slide, sorry. Okay. As far as the vote center selection criteria, we really follow multiple levels of federal, state, and our actual ROV internal policies and items that we're looking for in vote centers. Some of the federal standards we follow for accessibility include, reviewing the paths of travel, like from the parking lot to the actual voting room, slopes of the walkways, accessible parking and elevators. At the state level, there are 15 criteria that we follow and use to guide us in our selection. And these really include such categories as like the proximity to public transportation, minority communities, voters with disabilities, communities with low rates of vehicle ownership, and low voter registration rates. We do also consider such things as traffic patterns, distance and time of travel to vote centers, and free parking for our voters. Internally, we have our own requirements, which include the layout of the parking lot, the amount of available parking, the location, safety and security, and the size of the voting room, because we need sufficient space to conduct all of the voting processes. And for each vote center that we use or potentially are considering to use, staff go and do a walkthrough, including surveying the location, taking measurements, and determining if all of the ADA requirements are met. And as far as data, we use data from multiple sources, such as the American Community Survey, the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, and the California Department of Transportation, because we want to determine the best areas that have adequate facilities within the communities here in our county. And we have worked very, very hard to ensure adequate vote center coverage in high density areas, historically low voter turnout areas, and areas with underserved communities. So now moving on to the vote center observer activities for the recall election. As you know, and we post online and social media and press releases, et cetera, the ROV, we promote transparency of our election processes and encourage the public to observe our processes, whether it's here at election headquarters or out at one of our vote centers. But for the September recall election, we had many observers who completely followed the guidelines or any of the requests that we had. But we did have an abnormally high number of instances of disruptive, discourteous, and overly aggressive behaviors by the observers. These reports came from our election staff, our vote center staff, and from volunteers working at the vote centers. Some of the examples of the incidents reported by vote center staff and corroborated by ROV roving field staff that we had sent out to the vote centers include observers refusing to follow current health guidelines by not wearing their masks, observers yelling at and verbally harassing voters both inside and outside of the vote center, mostly about election myths and claims of fraud, observers grabbing pins, voting pins or Sharpies directly out of the hands of voters or the voting booths inside of a vote center, and basically observers engaging in verbal and physical intimidation of vote center staff. Similar events were experienced here at the ROV office, election headquarters, as our office was open for voting, as well as during the observation of all of the post-election activities that we're doing, processing and tallying. But because this behavior was so pervasive and in many cases egregious, the ROV reported these concerns to the Secretary of State's office, who in turn stated that other counties had also reported similar concerns. Not every county did, but many counties did have the same kind of activities that were in our county. The slide. So, the county and the ROV are working together, and we continue our commitment to be open and transparent with elections, but at the same time, we plan to take necessary steps to protect the safety and well-being of voters and election workers, and to prevent any disruption of an interference to the election process. So we have been currently developing plans to address these concerns for future elections, including revising and clarifying policies and procedures. Whoop, sorry, my slide. Revising and clarifying policies and procedures relating to observing, working with the County Director of Facilities Security to incorporate conflict resolution, de-escalation, and physical safety training for all of our election staff. We're also working with that director to expand the presence of trained and seasoned support personnel for rapid response intervention at vote centers when needed. We're also improving communication and training for both election workers and observer organizations about observer rights, responsibilities, and limitations under the law. And we're also working collaboratively with the Secretary of State's office and the California Association of Clerks and Election Officials to, develop strategies to better address these situations at the state level. So I just want to end with that, we take these incidences very seriously, and we will continue our efforts though to ensure our voters have a positive voting experience when they go to our office or to the vote centers. With that, I am available to answer any questions you may have, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Yes, thank you, Shannon, for the report. Supervisor Chavez, do you have any questions first before I open the public hearing?
Public hearing would be great.
Okay, all right, good. Let me go and open a public hearing as well, but I certainly would want to follow up, Ms. Boucher, regarding some of the things that took place and what you think would be the needed security posture in the future. to make sure more folks could feel protected, like you said, about the experience voting. So I'll ask that after the public hearing. I'll go and open the public hearing. How many speakers do we have right now, Clerk?
We currently have no request to speak.
Okay, I'll give a couple more seconds.
We have no request to speak.
Okay, if that's the case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Yes, Supervisor Chavez, why don't you go first?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the incredible work, Shannon, and your whole team. It's good to see you, Matt. You know, during such a crazy time, just amazing body of work. Two issues that I want to ask about, and I can't remember if you did this or not, but did we have did you have an advisory committee to help look at placement of polling places?
As per se, an advisory committee, we have our voting accessibility advisory committee and our language accessibility advisory committee. So part of our process, especially with the VAC, the Voting Accessibility Advisory Committee, is to bring to them any vote centers that maybe may appear not to meet ADA requirements, which ones may need fixes like adjusting the slope with a ramp, those kind of things as far as vote center ADA. So we do use our advisory committees to aid with that. We also seek from them suggestions of vote centers that we can use in the county that are well visited. So they help us with different things regarding our vote centers.
So the reason I ask is your staff was very good at getting to us and letting us know where they wanted to be and really digging into the community to look for locations. So that they did a great job, Shannon. Here's what I would like to recommend. I think there would be value in working with the Rocio's shop in terms of getting our OIR office, our LGBTQ office, and now we're going to have a disability office, which I'm super excited about, and getting those offices to play a role in gathering a few people from each of their bodies of work to give us some feedback on the locations. I got a lot of feedback after the election and the last few days before, as people started to notice where they were. A lot of concern about certain neighborhoods not being needs not being met, and the length of transit from communities that were transit dependent to their closest voting place, which I thought was an interesting perspective, right? That people noticed it because they were driving people to the polls. And so I think having a more formal, a more formal team. The other thing I will say is April, I'm not kidding you, she was amazing. But I also feel like, there are a lot of people who should have been helping her, right? And so anyway, just something, if you could give some thought to that, Shannon, there may be a reason that, and maybe you feel like one of the committees you already have can do that. Your thoughts on that? Oh, that's yours.
I'd be happy to look at that and take those considerations. I will make one point, in my opinion, of why I feel this election that came up for you in hearing feedback. With this election, because of the short turnaround and time frame of the election, the Senate bill reduced the number of vote centers that our voters are used to in a primary and general election, where we have 100 or more. This only required 34 vote centers because of the, like I said, short turnaround and higher vote by mail, I think, in the entire state, in my opinion. There were less vote centers that the Assembly and Senate established for us to obtain. So with that said, again, in my opinion, people may have had to drive further because there was 1/3 of the vote centers set by law. So, but I'd be happy to look into that and work with any of these other groups and talk to our LAC and VAC. But again, I think that's the biggest reason for this election.
Yeah, and that's a really fair point. I think that because we have that resource internal to the organization, we should just access it, but I totally understand the point you're raising. The second thing I wanted to talk about was security. And And I think you're really right that the whole world needs to learn more about de-escalation. I mean, it's in every single job. Anybody who's doing community facing or customer facing work is sharing the same kind of concerns. So I really appreciate that. I also, and I know Dr. Smith is here, so I'm not, Shannon, asking you to do this, but I would, through Dr. Smith, recommend that we ask for some support around election time from trained leaders on our own staff that are able to do, who have a lot of experience in de-escalation. As an example, it may make sense for us to have plainclothes, but probation officers at some of the facilities, especially where we know that, or where we get complaints early, given the length of the election cycle and how long some of them will be open, that we also maybe look at that with behavioral health, that we may even want to partner with, the Palo Alto University, who has a whole school. All they do is train clinicians. And this could be 20, 30, 40 hours of volunteer work, to be working with us. So again, both modeling and training that de-escalation work that you're talking about. And it will allow us to make sure that we have a more secure environment. I also, so I would just ask if you could, and again, I know Dr. Smith is busy, so he may have popped in or out, but I want to make sure that this comes back to this committee in the March timeframe with enough volunteers. I don't think we're talking about 100 people, but I think having 20 people for some period of time, that are willing to, I don't know if this would be a DSW body of work or not, but I think it could be very beneficial to people feeling like this is a secure election.
Yeah, I'm here. It probably won't qualify as DSW, but we are concerned about the upcoming elections, as you are and as the entire board is. So we will definitely come to you with a proposal for additional support with de-escalation teams, and also ways to separate some of the discordant individuals from the process. So heard you, and we will comply.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. The only other thing that I wanted to ask, just from a process perspective, did you feel like, I know this was such a weird election with these 34 polling places, and it's difficult to extrapolate out from that. But did you learn anything that you also want the board to just be aware of in terms of how we're thinking about your body of work, and any ways that we can be helpful to you, Shannon, in terms of making sure that, that maybe, for example, doing early recruitment for the poll watchers and that kind of thing, especially now that we have such a longer period of time, it seems like it must be more difficult to recruit. And maybe that's not the case.
Sure. Well, you've hit on some great areas, and we really don't have a problem, haven't had a problem in recruiting poll workers, vote center workers and volunteers. So, which is good. And we've actually already weeks ago started that well ahead of time for the June election, because the hiring process is involved. So we're doing really well there. You also hit nail on the head regarding using other county entities. We've already begun some discussions on the ground level here in the office and with county security over those issues. So I definitely will let you know if anything does come up that I can, the board would be able to help us with. I appreciate that. Jeff and administration has been very responsive to us and assisting us with any of our needs that as a result of this. We've done debriefings in the office. We are looking at recommendations and finalizing which ones are moving forward. Some have been finalized, some are still in just final kind of discussion. So I appreciate your offer, and I definitely will let you know if something I would be able to bring you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Boucher. Actually, Ms. Boucher, could you describe some of the actual events that is more notable or egregious that took place during the September 14th recall election that you could share with us?
Sure. As mentioned in the report, and where I said that people were, grabbing Sharpies, that may not sound to others as egregious, but to us that really is, because that's part of intimidation. What the experience that was shared with me was that whether it was an observer or member of the public did grab a Sharpie out of a voter's hand, was grabbing Sharpies out of the voting booth that were, unoccupied at a vote center, and basically yelling their beliefs. We have a lot of passionate people in our county, and they were there yelling their beliefs, and such as Sharpies will invalidate your ballot or will invalidate your vote, which is completely untrue, as the actual recommended fast drying ink pen for voting at a vote center with our scanners is a Sharpie, because they're one of the fastest, drying pens. But that act alone is, basically you're not following the vote center observer guidelines. You're not listening to the vote center staff as an observer, public member, walking through the area inside of vote centers. You should stay in your designated area. And yelling at voters. I mean, this is a form of intimidation, which is totally unacceptable. So, that incident alone covers multiple categories kind of there at a vote center that were egregious. We did send roving teams out to several vote centers where needed to help in any de-escalation. Some issues were resolved by the time they got there, which wasn't very long at all. As I said, we did have some observers that were completely reasonable and did follow the guidelines. As far as other events, there was an event where a vote center worker was poked, with someone poking their finger at them. So, that's physically touching a vote center worker. That is also unacceptable. And yeah, in the other egregious areas, really, it's just the disruption of our entire process. We're all, vote center workers and volunteers are trained to the extent, with our several months of training where they come in and rotate into training. And, working as a volunteer or a vote center worker, you're there to do the process and you're there to conduct the election. And having such disruption really just interferes with the process and the experience of the voter. So those are a couple samples, examples that I can share with you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Boucher. I am absolutely appalled about that happening, like right here in Santa Clara County. Having served in the military, we fought risking our lives to give people the right to vote. We have a sacred obligation to protect the voters, giving them the trust that it is safe for them to exercise this sacred right to vote without fear or intimidation. So that being said, do you think we need to have more uniformed presence to patrol on a rotating basis in the future to better protect the voters showing up to cast their votes, make them feel safe, and to frankly arrest the disruptors and harassers to this very foundation of democratic process?
In my opinion, that is a very delicate area. I believe, definitely that is something I can work with county council to discuss. I did have some discussions in 2020 with different people. And the reason I say it's a delicate area is I could almost see that going both ways. Having like a uniform presence could also intimidate voters. You may have voters that go there that maybe see a police officer or, uniform someone that might intimidate them. So there's just a delicate balance that we need to work between that kind of presence. And I believe part of our solutions and what we're looking into that, as Supervisor Chavez said, is looking at working with, maybe it's the probation department. There's some other ideas that we're discussing for plainclothesmen to be there. So it's just a delicate area.
No, I agree with you. I think there's certainly the fear of folks thinking that they don't want to be considered picked up for casting a vote. At the same time, I think it's important for people to feel safe. You're absolutely right. So striking a balance is very important. I do believe that when you say people actually reaching out to grab people's pens or voting instruments or poking fingers, that is actually, from what I remember in law school, I don't think the law has changed since then. It's called assault and battery. And those are crimes, maybe misdemeanor, maybe more serious, depending on how hard the person's poking and if somebody got injured. The point is that these are offenses that they would need to spend some time in our county jail facilities, or at least being booked. So I do think that people can get away with these things, and I think they really need to be enforced. So I just want to make sure that plainclothes is perfectly fine, but folks like that needs to be held accountable. It's not just a warning. I think people need to be taken away in handcuffs on these type of behavior. And I think by warning one or two people, seeing that these behavior is not acceptable, I think the other ones would behave better. So I think there's some warning that could be provided by doing that, and not just to protect the voters, protect your staff. Right, Ms. Boucher, many of them who work are volunteers, people who just work, at these polling stations. I've done it when I was, I think, 19 years old back in the high school. I remember right afterwards, I remember working those times. And, it really was kind of one of those experiences. I remember like, wow, this is how the democratic process works. It's so important. And I think it's really, really important that people who are doing those jobs, they're frankly not doing it for the money. We know that. They're doing it because they believe this is an important process. They're serving to have a safe environment. So I really do believe that it's, as you can tell from my voice, this one is a big deal to me. And it should be a big deal for everybody, because, if our democracy is not safe, right, people don't feel safe voting, that's a much bigger problem. As we know, last week, President Biden has called a conference on democracy, because the concept of democracy is frankly being attacked by many autocratic leaders around the world. And this is no small matter. And I want to make sure that, Ms. Boucher, from your perspective, if there are resources, there are solutions that's needed to make our voting process safer and that people could trust our process better, please let us know from the board's perspective so we could provide you whatever is necessary to make sure that people can cast the ballot safely. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, sorry, the Chavez, I just saw your hand is up again. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Otto. I think what you said, I just want to say how eloquently you said that. I think you're totally right. And the one party that I think should be engaged right away is the district attorney's office.
Yes. Because
they also have the community prosecutors that are, they're plainclothes, they're really, some of our most experienced folks. I forgot how many of them there are now, maybe 7. But I think engaging the district attorney in this early is going to be incredibly important. And Supervisor Lee, what I would recommend is that when this comes to be reported out to the board, and it should, your experience, Ms. Boucher, that there be an outline or at least a little bit of information explaining to the board the steps that will be taken to address public safety in these midterms, because I do think I just agree with everything that Supervisor Lee just said. And we do have a lot of talent and resources that you may need. And I think the earlier we engage the district attorney, the better, because I think that pursuing these cases, where appropriate, and that there were a lot of people who would make a decision about that, I think is going to be very important to people feeling secure and trusting the outcomes of the elections.
I'd say I agree, and I thank you both for your very much for your support. Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you, Ms. Boucher. And Supervisor Chavez, ready for a motion?
I will move the report to receive the report and get request feedback on the recommendations made by the committee.
And I second that. And ready for a vote?
Oh, we do have a late request to speak
Okay, sure.
that's
Let me
allowed.
go up the open public hearing for the last request. And
All right, the last speaker is Ubush Kumar Mehta. I am unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Again, thank you very much to the Board of Supervisors, as well as thank you very much to the county staff. I specifically wanted to mention about SB 152. There has been a change of rules that has been applied with respect to the SB 152 as well. Though the bill is a Division 1 of the election, whereas conducting any county to conduct any election with the all-mail ballots, it's important that with the citizens be advised that how the all-mail ballot election works, and also providing the education to the registered voters beginning the 10 days before the election. It is equally important to know that when there is a new law that is coming up with the universal election ballot drop-off at the location, and also to understand about the requirement of how the elections reporting, voter education, outreach campaign works in terms of a Secretary of State to establish a process for counties to grant a partial waivers from those proceeding to the election. Also, it is important to make sure that how Federal Election Commission works. When we talk about the government organization operating with the commission, with the Board of Supervisors, it is important that each and every commissioner, each and every board member is required to register their party along with the commission, where the Federal Election Commission giving the committee ID, where they are electronically registering the funding, as well as they are also registering the commissions to the Federal Election Commission, to the state, and as well as to the federal committees. So it is important that this will be implemented. However, also providing the outreach and educational resources to the citizens as well. Thank you very much.
And that concludes our request to speak.
Yes, and I'm ready to vote. And before, I just want to mention, would like to also ask Ms. Boucher if any physical barriers needed to be added so that observers are not going to be able to get to the voting booth, as the voting booth is supposed to be private and secure. Ideas like that you could bring back to the board in the future, in your future reports. Only appreciate it. And that's all I have. Okay, go ahead and let's take a vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you. Oh, Chairperson Lee, you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I'm just talking to myself. I received a report. Item number 14 is TSS, Technology Services Solutions Department, relating to status update on broadband and efforts of the Digital Equity Consortium. I believe presenting report, we have Martha Wapinski.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Martha Wapinski, Deputy County Executive, and joining me on the call today is Chief Information Officer Imre Kabai. We have a very brief presentation for you given the hour. Just to set the stage here, back in June, the board received a report on broadband infrastructure projects, as well as state and federal funding opportunities for broadband deployment, as well as plans for consultant study to evaluate the needs in the underserved areas of the county. So this is a status report on actions taken since we last reported in September. If we could go ahead, Yvonne, if you could cast these slides, please. Okay. And go to slide number 2, please. All right. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. It just reminding the public the context for the discussion. Back in July of this year, the governor signed into law SB 156, which makes a $6 billion investment in broadband infrastructure throughout the state for an open access middle mile fiber network and last mile connections as well. To that end, we have developed a digital equity consortium, and that group is represented in the middle box on the slide here. And then in addition to the state actions I mentioned, we're continuing to look at the provisions of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the proposed Build Back Better Act to determine how the county can best position itself for those funds as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Information Officer, who's going to give us an update on the recent activities with regard to broadband.
Thank you, Martha. On the next slide, you can see the achievements of this consortium. Besides creating the group, we have submitted 5 responses to the CPUC questions. These responses covered both technical aspects, like how can we create redundancy with the networks, or how can we get support for emerging technologies besides fiber. We also provided feedback related to other aspects, like what should be the criteria of categorizing a county rural versus urban. What would be the right motivation for the internet service providers to provide the services and provide the services at reasonable rates, etc. We also created an RFP, and we are bringing on board a nationally recognized firm to help us build our roadmap. We have a detailed list of deliverables that we expect from this third party to help with. We will have an overarching master plan. We see the consortium as a sort of conduit that connects different funding sources, different stakeholders who either provide services through broadband or in some way providing the infrastructure for that. The stakeholders, the residents who need the services, and the operational folks who will have to support these services. So the consortium is really this conduit that connects everything. Besides the master plan, we will have to take a look at the local market, broadband market, technologies. We don't want to build something for today. We would like to build something for the future. So we want those technologies and choices we make future-proof. And we will analyze the situation. There are several different reasons why people cannot get the broadband in their homes. Sometimes it's simply the lack of infrastructure. Other times it's the lack of affordability. Other times it's other reasons like just the lack of training or change management in some cases. And this person or this company will also help us with the specific initiatives and help us with writing the grants and going after the most valuable initiatives. So that's our quick summary, and we are open for questions.
Okay, thank you for the information. And Let's see, do we have any public that would like to speak on this item?
There are no requests to speak.
Okay, I'll go and close the public hearing. Supervisor Chavez, do you have any questions?
Just a couple of comments. So first of all, I want to thank the staff for their work on broadband expansion since SB 156 was passed and signed by the governor, particularly making timely filings before the Public Utility Commission. I know you know how important that is, and I really appreciate you leaning in to make sure that's happening. As you may know, last Tuesday, the board unanimously approved beginning the process of creating a municipally owned internet provider to bring affordable services to those residents and businesses that are currently unserved or underserved. I know that the referral was passed less than a week ago, but I am very interested in getting your feedback on the referral.
Sure, if I may, Supervisor. So work has begun on the response to the referral since, as you said, the board approved it last week. We will be returning on February 15th with options for the county to facilitate these broadband services to underserved households and businesses. We are looking at this point about options, cost, timelines, things like that, as well as we're tracking very closely any updates for state and federal funding. As you mentioned earlier in the meeting as well, we've already begun talking to the legislative office about the legislative priorities documents that you mentioned and how it relates to broadband. And we can include a status update in the February report. And then finally, I think I want to mention the consultant will begin the data collection and analysis no later than February. So we won't have the benefit of the full assessment. We can also provide any status updates at that point.
That sounds great. You know, I do just want to reemphasize the importance, I think, of fiber to home and fiber to business. And Imre, I heard what you said, and I think you're right that there will continue to be, I know, emerging technologies as we proceed. But I do think that the most tried and true opportunity we have is really embedding in that fiber. And so I mentioned that because I think that last mile connection is going to be a really important role for the public sector to play. I think particularly where it's not financially beneficial to the private sector. And I also just want to acknowledge that there may be opportunities for private sector and public-private partnerships that we also want to give thought to. I personally just want to make sure that the role we play elevates the consumer in terms of the consumer's needs being met. Like that's really my ultimate goal. And then the other thing I've learned, you know, during COVID, and I'm sure you both have been thinking a lot about this too, is that, you know, making sure that we're playing a leadership role relative to communications is just so important. I think we learned that both with, you know, when our fire departments were struggling to communicate during wildfires, and you know, and we think about the welfare and benefit of the hospital. And I really love that you pulled those partners in, because those partners really do reflect a lot of the need in our community. So thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this and appreciate your work.
Yes, thank you, Supervisor Chavez. Yeah, as Supervisor Chavez has mentioned about her and Supervisor Ellenberg's referral, I have mentioned that, and I'll just say it again, to ask the administration to work with a consortium on this referral, and also the consultant that was retained by the county to work together so that we're not duplicating any efforts. And I would certainly want to thank Imre, Nina, and the team over at TSS for answering some of our questions that I've had, particularly around the grant application process. It's helpful to understand what the county currently is when it comes to applying for the state funding. I'd also like to request that the administration provides an off-agenda report that provides informational updates to the grant process by next February. Hopefully by then, the county will have received further direction from the state as it relates to the timeline and the application process. And that's all the questions I have. And there's no further questions. Supervisor, may I have a motion?
Move to receive the report.
Okay, and I'll go and second that. And go ahead and take the vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving to, I guess this will be the last item for today, or could be the last item of the year, FGOC. Receiving report from the Office of County Council Executive and Procurement Department relating to procurement transformation and countywide contracting.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Gene Clark, happy to be here, Chief Procurement Officer. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes.
Super. I will try to be brief on my overview as well. I recognize the time here, but I'm really happy to share a few things here. I'll dig right in here and off we go. Oops, sorry. We have continued to support the EOC in major ways. As you can understand, procurement is such a vital force. We've added another 12 staff to it. And I think the last number I saw, off and on, we have 50 staff that have been in and out of the EOC. So happy to help that cause and, look forward to hanging in there in the long term. Professional development, really happy about this. We've got an academy we've started, which I'm really excited. This is going to be a training academy for internal staff in the departments as well. We're putting this awesome curriculum together. I'm really excited. The team's excited. We have this thing called a procurement liaison committee. And in that, we got multiple departments who work with us. They work on a contract, on a countywide contract work group, on our policies. So this whole academy thing is from internal procurement people throughout the county to take classes, working with ESA to make that happen, and SCC Learn. Then I just wanted to highlight some trainings here that we've done this year. You can see here, Vacant, Minute Track, cost price analysis, evaluation committee training. Look at there, we had 180 people on it. That was a big show. So 517 people have been trained on procurement this year. We think that's just fantastic. Then we're really doing a full court press on videos. We got to reinvent ourselves. We're not seeing each other as much. So let's get some videos going. Look here, we've got a procurement overview training that people can look at. We've got an eRFP Periscope training that used to be BidSync. We've got some new changes in P-card coming up. That is a training video that we're excited about. We've got a training on cost savings, cost avoidance, and a series of 6 recorded trainings for Vizient, which is a very large procurement. And then we've got some quizzes that we're working on. No finer way to allow people in a non-threatening way to see how they're doing, and they can take them till they pass them. The procurement P card coming up, that's one that if you're going to get a new card, we are putting a program in for a small quiz so that if you renew a card or if you're going to get a new card, you take that test. We're working with SCC Learn on that. So I think that's awesome. So a lot of great things here in training professional development. Wanted to highlight that we're going away from net 45 to net 30. I think this is fantastic. We're going to pay vendors sooner. There was some history with the program we had at net 45 that we wanted departments, this was before I got here, to be able to negotiate different terms, and out of that came a net 45. We've evaluated that carefully. We've pulsed the departments, we've pulsed the hospitals, and it's not been a very good program at net 45 and what we wanted to accomplish with it. So we are gonna, this is a discount program that we're gonna get, net 30 and in the mainstay of paying vendors as soon as we can, because cash is king in many times, particularly to our small vendors. Vendor vaccination, this is something we're proud of here. We had some requirements fully vaccinated for our vendors in September 30th. Contractors must complete a contractor certification of compliance. County contractors who fail to comply with this will be barred. We did take action on one particular vendor who was problematic, and I was thinking, the whole COVID thing was a farce, and resisted being vaccinated. And because of the services they provided, we had to terminate that contract. The great news here, if you look at this slide before you, we have a 97% response for our vendors that procurement manages centrally. That's 901 contracts that we targeted that we knew could be a possibility of services. We only have 23 contracts left to follow up on. So that 97% in the county is awesome. And what we did there, we took it a step further. We just didn't call them. They're signing off on whether they're vaccinated or going to be vaccinated or it does not apply. So that's just a great percentage. Agencies are responsible for department-specific contractors, and we're finalizing, working with our county council partners to make sure we've got the most current contract provisions in order to make sure contractors are vaccinated. So very proud of, quite honestly, our vendor community, who we have found very responsive, similar to our employees. Sustainable purchasing on the 7th of this December, we adopted the sustainable purchasing policy. We're working with Jazz Need over in sustainability on a regular basis, incorporating some of those in our admin guidelines effective January of this year. We're starting out with paper products and printing services. This is coming from the state of California. They've asked us to first look at paper products and mulch. This is Senate Bill 1383. We will conduct outreach to lead agencies. We're partnering with them. We're also talking about some specification developed by some experts who really know how to specify purchasing sustainability efforts. I think we need that expertise to spec out what we know, where can we get the big bang for our buck in areas like fleet, like architect our buildings, you know, all kinds of LEED certification areas there that we can tap. So I think this program is going to do really well in 2022, and happy to partner with the Office of Sustainability. We're happy to report that we're working on our first county comprehensive disparity study. That's neat. Currently in negotiations with the top ranked proposer. We can't talk about that right now, but that January 25, it's coming to you for a recommendation for award. The beauty around this disparity study is we've got an awesome team within the county. I think there's 12 or 13 really powerful, smart, intelligent, capable people from the departments. And you see here on the scope on the third bullet, what we're going to be looking to do. We're looking at data collection, assessment, utilization, identification of geography opportunities, outreach. I can tell you we recently partnered with MBC and VTA on a vendor outreach, and no surprise, this is coming up. We were able to talk about it, that we're soon to make an award and move that forward so that, you know, really what we needed is data. We haven't had that data to be able to identify the areas of small business, LGBT, you know, disabled veterans, all those awesome areas that we haven't had good content for data. So this is going to be, I think, another great effort for diversity this coming year. Wage theft. This was a pilot program we started with the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement. We reviewed 158 vendors. We get some of that information from the state of California and the Labor Commission to resolve these. So we have help from them. That's one approach we use. We found 3 violations in our county so far. Those were all fixed, meaning the vendors who were identified paid up, so to speak, what they owed, and they're obviously on notice that we're watching them. And we will continue to partner with the enforcement group we initially started, I can share with you, with our decentralized team and the pilot. And what we're excited now is we're going to go to the centralized team for rolling out more outreach, more training, and more monitoring of contracts for wage theft. So I guess in summary, it's just good triangle, if you will, of the state of California, the county, and then, you know, the outreach and training that we do to make sure we've got adequate monitoring and enforcement. When we see these situations, we're going to move on them. And that's already what we've done when we found the 3 out of the 158 that were provided to us by the state of California. We've done well in our recruitment. Vacancy rate from 25% to 18. What's great here, the department is targeted to reduce our total vacancy rate to 10% by this January. So we've had an awesome team on it. We look at it a lot. We partner with ESA, and that rate is looking pretty good for us at 10%. So really happy. CBOs. On September 29, we had an initiative there attended by 120 CBOs. We talked about everything from implementation of vaccination mandates to extending emergency operations center. We had some good discussions about DSWs and recognize the importance of the CBOs out there. We really want to give them credit. We couldn't begin to handle this pandemic without our CBOs. So we try to recognize that. We are constantly on the move for training. We've got some exciting things coming up. We've done some RFP best practices, and I know there's 2 more efforts coming up here this fall/spring where we're going to be partnering with the CBOs. Obviously, we'll continue to work with the Office of Budget Analysis, the CEO's management, and our partners in the community. So what a valuable network of CBOs. They bring so much strength, good ideas, and we really want that relationship to get stronger and stronger. Director of Procurement, Cheryl, she's off today, or otherwise I'd have her say a few words. She's retiring after 18 years with the county. We're going to miss her. And I think just 2 more things, and I'll stop and come up for air and be happy to answer any questions. We just found out today that we got a CSAC award for our voluntary vendor cost reduction initiative. So that's really awesome, because we had 87 vendors step up to the plate and give us $12 million in savings. And the beauty of that is that really helped everyone, because we internally as a county, we had too many people at DSWs. We couldn't do our own RFPs, to be quite honest. So it was this win-win where the vendors are strapped, the county's strapped, and they get another year or 2 years, depending on their situation that we talked about, for no competition. So that just meant a trusting relationship. I think it's going to take us far. The last thing I'll say is we got an Achievement of Excellence in Procurement Award. It's an AEP. It's designated to us by the National Purchasing Institute. Very happy about that. So I will stop here. I've given a lot of information in a short amount of time, and I'm happy to address any questions that you may have.
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure.
Chavez, do you have any questions?
I have some comments, but I'd love to hear from the public, and then I would love to just talk to Jean for a minute.
Sure. Okay. I'll go and open the public hearing. Anybody in public would like to speak on this issue?
Yes, we do. The next speaker is Ubush Kumar Mehta. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate again for the opportunity to speak to the Board of Supervisor. Well, I want to mention about when, particularly when we are mentioning a procurement, what becomes important is the streamlining the process and finding a vendors to pay. Now, it is what we call a procurement is a process of assembling moving parts. When not efficiently when components communicate or breaks in the supply chain or causing a costly error or lost time or the missed opportunity, can be caused. So it is important that the upper management, especially the upper level management, faces a daunting task of streamlining this process from top to down, implement the policies, process that mutually benefits procurers and suppliers alike. The dichotomy that exists that 2 functions can make the negotiations and finding the common ground difficult. That's where the streamlining is important, whether that be is being done through the PO matching or electronic invoices or the incorrect invoices. The tools are to be utilized that allow the suppliers and procurers to quite literally to make sure that they are on the same page, and then to determine that what approvals are required for the streamlining the process. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
And that concludes our request to speak.
Yes, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Supervisor Chavez, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. And I first wanted to say, Jean, if you could share our deep thanks to Cheryl and appreciation for all of her work, years and years of work. And second, I just want to really say how much I appreciate the enthusiasm in which you bring to talk about all things procurement. Like, I feel like you could be the crazy George of procurement. I don't know if you know who he is, but
I do.
Okay. Good. So that way, that's not an insult to anybody listening. He's just very enthusiastic.
Taken very positively.
Good. So, you know, I wanted to just ask if we could get a report back on the work relative to wage theft in the January, February timeframe. I know you're going to be speaking with them, but I'd love to make sure that the board's alerted to what body of work you see coming out of that, how we can take the pilot, frankly, and stabilize it. But I really appreciate that you want to talk to your partners before you make a recommendation on that. So we'll look forward to hearing about that.
Happy to.
And then lastly, I think the body of work, first of all, I really appreciate the presentation. And I think the body of work really aligns nicely with the board's overall goals. And in particular, I'm interested in what we can do to really expand our reach into our local businesses and into census tracts that we don't normally do business with. And so again, I'd be really interested in off agenda on just how you're thinking about that, and or if you want to come back to this committee as you start to process the next steps. I'm very enthusiastic about it, just really interested in where you're going to take it.
Excellent. I am happy to do that. I do have some thoughts already. As you say, I want to circle it, the wagon a little bit more on it. And, you know, we've also got good input in the community too, that people like MBC and others who can shed some light. So as I often say, start. And I think we can get some good traction going. Sometimes it's just little things, smaller things, and then it just grows. But I do have some thoughts on it that I'm going to be bringing forward.
Thank you. And if it's possible, if that could come back to us as you're processing that, maybe first quarter.
Okay.
You know, as you're, and the other thing I would, again, like I shared this earlier with Shannon Boucher, but we have some really great departments that are doing tons of community outreach. I think it would be worth, as we're thinking about the small businesses, working with the team that did the outreach to some small businesses, just to help think about what would make it more possible for those partners to engage with us.
Absolutely. Yes. You know, what I want to get going too, if this pandemic could ever cut loose, I really want more outreach in person. We have a great training room over at Tasman in our building there. And I just can't wait to have them in there to get the direct connection and the Q&A, you know, face to face. So meanwhile, we're doing everything we can on Teams and meetings and outreach events, but we almost can't do too much, to be honest. And I want to look at some of our processes because they're intimidating for small companies. And I recognize a few of those things where I think we have opportunity to streamline.
There are two recommendations I would want to make along those lines. One is that in partnership with Lincoln Law School, they have an interest in supporting small businesses through their certification processes. Okay. And they've done a little bit of a test just to explain how difficult it is to get through those processes. And I think there would be benefit, and I'm happy to connect you with them because I think they're doing some interesting work along those lines that might be of help to you.
I would like it.
And then the other is that we do have, like I said, our own small business outreach teams that have talked to lots and lots and lots of businesses about, you know, their current situation. So you actually have a group of people that are doing outreach now relative to COVID. With the people who are doing outreach on the doors, they've also been talking to neighborhoods about whether or not they need access to CalFresh or other services. So what you might want to think about is whether or not we can layer in the pilot with the folks that are going to business to business, to see if they can incorporate, you know, your your work as a way to do a better job of engagement at a much deeper level, because these are businesses that under normal circumstances would have no reason to talk to us.
Thank you very much. Noted.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you.
Yes, Jean, first of all, I just want to echo the gratitude for Cheryl Liu's 18th year of service to our county, and please send that to Cheryl for us.
I sure
You
will.
mentioned the issue regarding the pay, 45, 30 days.
Right.
And you know, I actually have dealt with one of those questions earlier, relating to a vendor to Vask earlier regarding this one payment, and eventually was able to get paid much sooner. And as we all know, it's really not just a matter of getting that discount, right? It's really being a good procurement buyer, especially for the small vendors. That cash flow is not just something small. It's a matter of survival for many of these small businesses.
It is. It is.
So because of that, I know as much as the fact that we have this policy, and you know, it's not like we won't have the money to pay because the county has the money.
Yes.
And it's like we're making anything on the interest. Interest is
Yes.
practically nothing.
Yes.
Why not pay them, you know, earlier? And I think it just makes us a much better customer from the
Right.
vendor's perspective, right? I think that's important. Now, the other issue, of course, is regarding the outreach for contracting management to the small businesses, the woman-owned or minority-owned vendors. Can you tell us what type of work we're doing in terms of outreach? Do we do non-English language outreach? And what type of plan of office has done in order to continue to maximize our outreach to these businesses?
Sure. Great question. We have a few approaches. We are providing alternative languages where we can. We certainly have staff that help in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that communication continues. The technology as well. I think getting the outreach out there to more targeted areas is going to be probably one of the primary areas that we can do, where we can give outreach and put a human element to it. So we've got to be able to, and this is where the beauty of the disparity study is. Where are they? In what sector? And how many people do they have? And what services do they have? That data is something we're craving, because we hear things, but now that we're going to get a good study out of it, then we can target and go, hey, this sector or this commodity or this industry, and small businesses in particular, whether it's the food program or some other, you know, the count your services right in the county, we're a high mix, generally low volume, although if you take food, that's pretty big in the jails and such. But I would say that outreach has got to be important. And I think there's a huge tracking, a data base that we need to start creating. If we can get some momentum out there with that and start sharing it, that, hey, you know what, this person and this person was able to do this. Maybe it's not that hard. Let's try this with somebody else here. We need that momentum to gain itself, because I think that's there. And tell them some of these processes, what can we pilot? What might we be able to pilot with respect to process? And I've got some ideas on that. I need to talk to our partners in county council to make sure we're fair, transparent, objective. But I think there can be criteria around it that can streamline and, equally important, simplify those areas that are intimidating. Because once they're in, it's a great relationship. You know, they learned how, and just as you point out, Supervisor Lee, we pay on time. We do have money. And when there's ups and downs and ebb and flows of the pandemic itself, it can be brutal out there. So what we've got to do is invite this open, fair, friendly environment to come in and just learn about it. And then, you know what, why don't you go ahead and register, right? Just register with us. We'll send you opportunities, automate on an automated fashion. So those kind of things, I think there's a confidence element, and I understand that there's disparity, opportunities here where people may feel like they're not important. So it's our job to make sure they are important and to try to reach out there. And word of mouth, just like these things that Supervisor Chavez says, hey, go over to Lincoln Law School. We're open to those things. We are. You'll rarely find us shutting any door on what we might be able to suggest. So I hope those are some areas there that will help. I know will help this coming year. It's going to be one of our top priorities. We step one, get that disparity study done. That brings rich data.
Great. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
You bet.
And let's see, no further comments or questions. I'll go ahead and ask if there's a motion. Supervisor Chavez.
So moved with the recommended timelines included.
Great, thank you. And I'll second that. And let's call for a vote.
Vice Chairperson Chavez.
Yes.
And Chairperson Lee.
Yes, as well.
Thank you.
And I believe that goes to our next item, which should be the adjournment. So if no more comments, we'll adjourn our meeting to Friday, January 14th, 2022 at 2 p.m. All right, I just want to say thank you, everybody, and wishing everybody have a safe and happy holidays. Looking forward to seeing everybody in the new year. I will see you next year, right?
Thank you all. Thanks,
Take care.
staff.
Good stuff. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.